All right. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the second iteration of the Edgelord Protagonist. And let's jump back into it. We left off with talking about Mr. Soprano. So, Tone, or Tony Soprano, right? The protagonist of The Sopranos show takes place in the place that I currently am living, which is North Jersey. And why is he on this list, Nolan?
Tony?
Mm-hmm.
He might be the edgiest person on here.
He's a good family man.
He is absolutely a sociopath who he is like the definition of what we've already built up, being bored, alienated, and angsty. Like, he's filled with paranoia all the time because of his line of work and the life that he chooses to live, and he still frequently finds a lot of time to just be bored. Like, he'll just sit and like watch ducks for 2 hours, and then he'll complain about sitting in an office for like 5 minutes waiting for something. And he is super angsty. His angst comes out in a lot of ways. Like, he'll just get angry over very little. He'll murder people over almost anything, beat people up over nothing. He's incredibly racist.
What? No, not Tone.
Yeah, just he'll work with anybody. Like, it doesn't. If making money is on the table, it doesn't preclude him from any of that. But he definitely doesn't want any race mixing.
Right. Money does trump nationality as far as he's concerned for the most part. That being said, obviously the family is the Italians. Yeah, where would you say that the angst comes from? Like, is it childhood angst? Is it more like teenage angst? Or is it just like adult angst? Because for me,
Both.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, a big part of The Sopranos is laying out where Tony's problems come from, like where he gets his neuroses, why he is the way he is. Like, he's just brought up as a child watching people die. Like, I don't think it's until the second or third season that it's revealed why he like is having the panic attacks where he passes out, and then it like all comes back to the fact that he watched a dude get his hand cut off in the meat in the butcher shop, which gives him trauma. But then on top of it, he also watches his parents fuck, and I think meat is involved in it. Like, he's either eating meat or they are using meat. I don't remember which. But those two things together, and then the weird relationship he has with his mom, just makes it so that every time there's meat and any bit of stress in his life, he just immediately gets the ringing in the ears and then passes out.
Yeah, I believe it also cuts back at one point in time to when he either felt like incredibly ashamed from seeing his parents having sex, or it was something else that was happening, but then that was the first time that he passed out. Like, I seem to remember that happening when he was a kid. Yeah, I mean, going back to the duck situation as well, it seems like completely random in a lot of ways, like why that's included, like what's going on with the ducks. But it is continually referenced actually a few points in time throughout as a symbol that illustrates how Tony is experiencing the world, what he thinks of what's going on, right? And with that being said, I just kind of wanted to draw our attention to the ducks because that also happens in Catcher in the Rye and is a very strong symbol in the Catcher in the Rye, just wanting to feel like you can get away at a moment's notice, just wanting to feel like you can go somewhere else. That like free feeling, right? Ducks travel together as well. That sense of belonging. Um, all those sorts of things, like the natural beauty as well. And Tony gets really caught up in that. I think it's the first episode, right, where the ducks come in. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why he gets so hung up on that is because he, you know, can't have those things, or he has them. He has some of those things, but he can't appreciate it due to the shit that he dealt with as a kid, and his inability to overcome that or figure out how to navigate the world due to his quote unquote job, due to his friends in accordance with his job, right, or family rather. Um, yeah, but as you said, you think he is the angstiest one on the list so far, which is interesting.
Yeah, and like we kind of, he's the one who gets the most screen time. Like he's the most developed character of everyone on this list. Sopranos lasted for 6 seasons, where the last season is like a double season, so functionally it's 7 seasons. I don't remember how many episodes, but it's a lot. It's like probably 80 or 90. But yeah, basically we come to understand why he is the way he is and how he's like molded to be a mob boss, and like how most of his actual hopes and dreams are crushed by his parents, who are like highly dysfunctional people, and how they sort of put their problems into him on top of the other problems he's developing. And then that's all in the past. Those are just a handful of flashbacks we get throughout the show, but it's obviously a lot more extreme in like the last probably 2 seasons, maybe 3 seasons, as his life just continues to get more stressful because he's always being watched by the FBI. The cops are always out to get him. There's always rancor between him and his other men, between him and like other gangs, other parts of the mob. Most of it comes through as like his like paranoia affects his anxiety, but because he doesn't like he it's weird because he's a sociopath, but not in the normal way we see, where it's just like he's uncaring, like Anton Chigurh is just like an unfeeling, uncompromising lunatic who just loves killing and has, his own weird code. But like,
Yeah, that's kind of why I would hesitate to call him a sociopath, but he certainly exhibits almost all of the symptoms of a
no, because
sociopath.
he definitely doesn't care about other people's feelings, and they don't factor into how he makes decisions at all. Because he's just not able.
That's fair.
Like he gets emotional, but it's only ever over animals or over someone else getting screwed in a way that screws him over too. Like throughout the show, people come to him and complain about their problems, and his response is always, "Oh, well, this thing happened to me also, and I'm angry about it."
Yeah, and so like his point of reference is always, "Oh, did that shitty thing happen to me? Can I understand it because something similar happened to me?" Instead of him actually trying to take that empathic stance,
Yeah.
of thinking about it.
That's,
Okay,
that's
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
narcissist.
right.
But yeah, he basically gets he. I think he gets a lot of credit in general when people talk about anti-heroes, because he was like the first big one on TV. Like not only is like Sopranos like the first major shift into like a new type of drama that just didn't exist before, it's also the shift into having a villain be the main character. Like I'm not that well versed on TV history, but there was not a lot of TV content that was like R rated to this point. Like HBO, I think, had been mostly known for putting out like comedy specials, and then Sopranos just kind of opened that up completely. Like obviously similar to Walter White.
Who came after him, I might
Yeah,
add.
like 10 years later. Like we talked about how he's kind of a sitcom version of Scarface. Well, I mean, Tony Soprano like the entire show of The Sopranos is fundamentally like a family drama, and there are sitcom elements, like in terms of like every episode kind of ends with them being like, well, we're all a family, we all got to get along, and then it mocks that idea by being like, also the mob is their family, and the things related to that.
Right. I'm
but
specifically thinking of some of the zoom outs that they do at the end of episodes with like music playing, and you're like,
and
how am I supposed?
eating
Yeah,
the pasta, or he's eating the gabagool, or
yeah, and like sometimes you're left wondering like, how am I supposed to feel? But if you actually are paying attention, it directly tells you how you should feel about it.
yeah, but like what I was trying to say was like he strangles a guy in like the fourth episode. Like we already know he's sketchy, but then we're shown like just how violent this guy is and how evil he is.
That's not the guy who's like hiding out, or is it?
It is, yeah.
Oh,
yeah, it's the
okay.
guy, the travel insurance agent.
Gotcha.
Oh,
yeah, that episode it definitely is a defining moment of TV.
Yeah, because it's the first time where they're like, oh yeah, you can just have the main character of the series be an unflinching murderer. And this is like while he's on a trip with Meadow, his daughter, for visiting a college. And then she's like, where did you go? What were you doing? And he's like, everything's fine. It's all good. I took a walk in the woods and stepped in some dirt. Don't worry about it. And she very clearly knows he was doing something shady.
Yeah. And what's so fascinating about not only the show but Tony is that it does show his complexity within the fact that he, like, you do feel sympathy for him at times, given like his backstory, given what happened to him as a kid, right? So you do feel sympathy, but you're not saying that justifies his actions. It's more so like you can see the train of thought, or you can see the train of trauma rather, that sort of builds up into him doing something, him doing whatever it may be, which is very powerful, instead of you just having I don't know which character we could choose on this list, like Travis Bickle, for instance. You don't really know his past so much. I mean, imagine like a show about Travis Bickle about his past, right?
Yeah, I think there is one of those. They just made it a couple years later. It's called The Deer Hunter.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's reasonable. I'm more so saying that like having that info allows you to put yourself into his shoes, instead of you just labeling Tony as a psycho, and just being like, oh yeah, this dude just loves to murder. It allows you to, I don't want to say empathize, but like you just see what can go into making someone like this, and not that you understand their actions, but more so like you see them for like who they really are, I guess, instead of putting them in that psycho or sociopath category.
I think in some ways you root for him for a while. Like,
yeah, like I'm not saying that you see him as like a monster. Like he is a monster. Like I would say he's a monster, but I'm saying you wouldn't readily put him in the monster category as you might some other characters. Like as the show asserts.
Yeah. But like the show does it in a couple of different ways, like how it tries to balance him and what the audience's view of him should be, as like what level of villain he is, because he frequently justifies his own actions by being like, well, we only killed a couple of people versus like somebody else killed a bunch Like that manifests in the later seasons where he's helping the FBI, like he's giving up terrorists.
Right. Yeah, and it's fine giving up terrorists. You just can't give up your family.
Because he still views himself as being an American.
Right.
Like that's part of the show is like he excuses a lot of it by being like, this is just the American dream. Getting money is, and like the morality in between is irrelevant because bankers steal and terrorists exist.
Yeah. So we kind of compared him to Walter White in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, they use their family as an excuse frequently. Tony never repents, though. Like, the show ends with him being shot in front of his family because of how he's able to manipulate them into sticking around.
Right, a pretty controversial ending to the show, and it completely divides the audience. I know you're pretty certain that that's what happens. I don't think everyone is as certain. I don't really know how I feel about it. I definitely think that's what they want you to think. That's for sure. The end of The Sopranos.
Yeah, I mean, I view it in like one of three ways that I would defend that it's just a certainty that he dies. Like, one is the metafictitious narrative that, you know, the show ends, therefore Tony doesn't exist anymore. So, you know, metaphorically, he's dead either way. The show is done. They're not bringing it back. He's done. He's gone. So that's one way in which the show is like very deliberate about, because the show frequently has a lot of elements of meta narration about the nature of TV shows in general, which is interesting given that it's like the first big prestige level TV show that kind of took people by surprise and by storm. Other than that, I mean, there's a ton of textual clues in the show itself that reference the fact that he's just been killed. The one popular one a lot of people mention is there's a scene a few episodes before the finale where Tony and Bobby are talking, and they're talking about their legacies and what it might feel like to die. And they both mention that dying is probably like instantaneous and a surprise.
And they're on the canoe when they're in the canoe.
Yeah, they're on a boat together.
Yeah.
Which ironically is, you know, twisted when Bobby just gets shot brutally several times. It doesn't die instantly, but he doesn't see it coming. Versus Tony, where it's like, you know, somebody probably just walked up behind him and shot him in the head.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to use this as evidence, but like the show also is building up towards an ending where Tony is out having a nice meal with his family, and that's how it ends, or he gets...
It's not a nice meal. They're eating like onion rings and French fries.
A good old American meal. It's a nice American meal. Yeah. It's a nice American meal. And is that the ending that happens, or is it that they're eating that and then he is killed? I am more likely to agree with the one where he dies. I don't think it's a happy ending for him. I don't think the show would build up towards, oh yeah, and he just gets what he deserves, which is he gets to live. He gets to live on. I think it's more likely that he gets what he deserves, which is he gets shot in front of his family. Which the entire...
He's made so many enemies, and like, even though the narrative tries to tell you that he hasn't been killed and that, you know, he wraps everything up with the New York people, like, they would still want him dead. Most of his friends that are still alive want him dead. Like, people who have already died, who are powerful, would have hired people to want him dead. Like, there's a hilarious theory about, do you remember Eugene? He's like a really tall guy who works with Vito and Ralphie. He, in like, I think it's the third or the fourth season, he like gets an inheritance from an uncle who died, which is millions of dollars. And so he is convinced by his wife to try to like leave the family so they can move to Florida and retire and not have to deal with, murdering people anymore.
Is he the one that kills himself?
Yes, he hangs himself because he's not allowed to leave. So the theory is he has this like special jacket he always wears, and he talks about how there's a club of like special jacket wearing people. And in the last scene, a guy walks into the restaurant Tony's in and goes to the bathroom like the Godfather.
Right.
And it's like the camera focuses on this guy. Like he comes in and it hits him, and then it pans with him as he goes to the bathroom. And that's his only distinguishing factor is this jacket. And so, I like that theory a lot, that he's the one that does it. And it was specifically because of Eugene and the jacket wearing club. But all that aside as to, whether or not he dies, he's beyond the pale of like pure evil. He's killed like a lot of his good friends in the process of surviving to get to where he is, and family members. So like, yeah. As for anti-heroes, he's probably the most interesting anti-hero on the list in terms of like being the hero of his own story and the hero of his own life. But, he is just a murderer. He's just a thug and a cheat.
Yeah. Yeah, and one that continually rationalizes his decisions while trying to overcome his trauma through murder.
Well, he's not like even trying to really overcome his trauma, which is
well, he tries like half-heartedly. Like he does try, like by seeing a therapist, right? Obviously that's
he's not trying to overcome his trauma. He's trying to make sure he doesn't have those panic attacks anymore and fall over, because it would make him look bad in front of his men.
Right, that's what I mean, is that he starts down the road, but he never follows through at all with it. And you're saying that the point behind it, the objective, is that he doesn't lose face. Like his reputation isn't tarnished.
And that's made clear by the end of the shows. He never had an intention of getting better. He never wanted to improve himself beyond physically being okay and not having these panic attacks. Like he didn't want to get to the root cause of the problem. He just wanted it to go away.
Yeah. I mean, that might separate him from most of the people on this list anyway.
Oh, yeah, I think it's a big separation from him, because he isn't like the injustice that a lot of these characters think they're fighting for or fighting against is not what Tony is. Like the injustice he sees is that he doesn't have enough money and power. And so he just takes it, and he thinks that it's justified because other people are suckers and not as smart as him.
And if he doesn't take it, someone else will.
Yes. Which is absolutely true in his world.
Yeah, which also begs the question, in some regards, if you don't do something, someone else will. Like in our world.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I don't think we really have to choose to be gangsters or not in order to succeed and get money, but
I don't mean I don't mean in everything. I more so mean as far as like money goes. Like if you don't do something for money, someone else is probably also doing that for money, or someone else is doing it for money. That's more so what I mean.
Oh, yes, then yeah.
Yeah, I did not clarify that at all. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because he and Henry Hill are sort of like just separated by time, despite being in similar situations.
Yeah, a bit. I mean, they reference Goodfellas constantly in The Sopranos, and there are a bunch of actors from it in The Sopranos.
Yeah,
which is the funniest part. Like, Polly is just a character in both and references good. Like, dude, you're in the movie.
I forgot he was in that.
He's not the only one. The guy that plays Chris is in both.
The Shine Box guy is in it.
Yeah, he's Philly. Yeah.
That dude is probably my favorite, just because of his like overall aesthetic. Like he just looks perfect for that.
To be Phil.
What?
To be Phil.
He just looks like he was ripped right out of any of those families. Yeah, out of any of those times. I'm not that interested in talking about Tony in regards to Tyler Durden.
They're not really similar.
What about him and Alex from A Clockwork Orange?
Yeah, I would say they're kind of similar. Like, Tony seeks to be the one that takes over his own environment and control it, and will do anything to accomplish that. And he is, like Alex, driven pretty exclusively by his need to make himself feel better.
Yeah, like they're both certainly pleasure seeking, whether that's through violence or sex or drugs.
Tony does a ton of drugs. Tony fucks a ton of people. He's always going to restaurants.
I love how you threw going to restaurants, but yeah, that is absolutely pleasure seeking.
Yeah, just eating a nice meal. Like, he goes super far out of his way to keep Arthur's restaurants afloat, even when he's a disaster.
Anything else that you would like to say about Tone?
No, I mean, we didn't really talk about the way in which like people idolize him, which is definitely true. Like he is perhaps more morally dubious than a lot of these characters, possibly on par with Alex from A Clockwork Orange. Tony doesn't rape anybody, so he's probably like right on the line with Alex. But
yeah, that's true.
So yeah, I'd say he's like a cross between Walter White and Alex in a way.
Yeah, I think he's more close to Walter White than Scarface, which is interesting because Scarface is more like gangster in a lot of ways. But yeah, I think he's more close to Walter White and Alex, which I never really thought about him being similar to Alex, but I definitely think that now in a lot of ways. It's interesting because Alex is like supposed to be like probably 20 years younger than him. So I'm just picturing Tone 20 years younger placed into that world. You probably would be similar.
Yeah, I would think so.
Cool. Do you want to backtrack to Nightcrawler or move forward? And jump back to that when we have a good segue.
Yeah, I would. I'd rather talk about Rick from Rick and Morty.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The characters have some major differences, but the way in which they come about is the same. Like Tony Soprano and The Sopranos only exists because someone found a way to manipulate TV where they could copy the family drama sitcom format and then just have the setting be the New Jersey mob. Whereas Rick and Morty is just, it's the same thing. Most of the early seasons of the show focus exclusively on family and family drama, with like science fiction just being the world that they're in. And that falls off over time. just as the show has, with, they focus less on the family and more on just like pop culture references and gobbledygook. But the character of Rick stays mostly the same in terms of just being an edgelord, like the edgelord. He's more similar, I think, to Walter White than Tony Soprano, though, just because he's entirely driven by his ego. But it's also the thing he hates the most, because he hates being so smart, because it makes him bored and it makes him feel better than everyone else, and that produces his extreme level of angst.
Hence the alcoholism.
Yeah. Obviously, the childish humor of it is a huge difference from anything else we've talked about so far, because nothing else we've talked about is really so steeped in like fart jokes, poop jokes.
Yeah.
Or just like non sequitur jokes, like put the schlim on the plumbus.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything that we've talked about yet that's as ironically deep as Rick and Morty, unless like Fight Club or Clockwork Orange. I think a Clockwork Orange would be there. Fight Club, I haven't read the book, so I don't know the depth to it. Yeah, as far as irony goes, I think A Clockwork Orange is heavily ironic, steeped in irony, as well as Rick and Morty.
Yeah, I mean, a big like part of what I want to talk about with these characters is how they're idolized, and Rick is probably the most, just because he's the newest character and it was a part of the, took over the cultural zeitgeist for 3 or 4 years. That has since gone away because the show took too long to release episodes and sort of lost favor with a lot of its fan base. But in terms of people being like, yeah, I'm like Rick, I'm smarter than everyone else, I'm the smartest guy in this room, nobody gets me, nobody understands the depth of my pain. People really latched onto that.
Yeah, absolutely. I do find it fascinating that there are definitely people out there who are insanely smart, who use alcohol to slow their brain down so that they can like have a more enjoyable existence, like for that span of time. Like I'm sure you know I'm not going to say by name, but I'm sure you know who I'm thinking of in regards to that.
Yeah, I know a bunch of people like that.
Yeah, which is actually like pretty sad to think about, that they turn to alcohol in order to slow their brains down to enjoy things. But
better than heroin.
Yeah, I would say so.
But yeah, that's the part that people who idolize him, like Rick specifically, don't understand, is the tragedy of the character, where like you're not supposed to empathize with the fact that he thinks there's no meaning to life. Like that's because the show isn't nihilistic, at least not the first 2 seasons. It grows more nihilistic as it goes on, which makes the show suffer inherently, because why would I watch a show that tells me it doesn't matter?
Yeah. If it doesn't matter, then why are you watching it?
Which is why I lost a shitload of its fans, because the average audience at home is only going to watch for so long when every episode ends with them going, "Well, that was stupid and dumb, and I hated it." To itself, like it's a self-aware show that hates itself, or grew to hate itself. Like it resented its own popularity, which, I mean, maybe that'll go away. Maybe the show will see a resurgence in quality in later years.
Yeah, I mean, I wish Rick would have a more satisfying arc, I guess, or like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, I wish they would do something more with him, I guess. Like
With
Rick,
his character.
yeah. like have some type of arc, right? Like I don't want to say he's stagnant, but he's definitely not stagnant. That's not
He's
true.
pretty stagnant. Yeah, I would say he is a
At this point, he's stagnant.
static character. Yeah.
Static, yeah.
The major thing that comes through for him in like the one of the last seasons I saw is like the fact that he's gay, and that's supposed to be a huge reveal.
Oh, I just straight up forgot that.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Because it turns out that has nothing to do with his character, doesn't make him more interesting, and continues on the fact that he is static. Because it adds nothing to him. It's just like a half-hearted attempt to save some character that existed before, and it's like, well,
are you saying that who we see as who we are sexually attracted to doesn't add any depth to who we are?
no.
Oh. You're not saying that?
I am saying it adds nothing.
Yeah. That's also what I'm saying.
Unless you have a really, really specific thing, then it might.
Right. I just don't. Yeah, I don't think it adds all that much to you as a character or your identity. It certainly makes up your identity, that's for sure, because it's how you view the world and it's like who you are. But as far as like a character arc, yeah, there's a lot more to you than just that facet.
Not necessarily. There just should be if you're gonna make, TV show out of it with hundreds of episodes.
Right. Forget the thread that I was gonna pull in regards to Rick. It'll come back to me. Yeah, it had to do with like I wish that they would do something with his arc in some capacity.
I haven't seen the newest season, and it may address that directly by being somewhat related to the quote unquote main story. I kind of assume it doesn't, but you never know.
I remember what I was going to say. I think that Dan Harmon, I think that Rick is Dan Harmon's like both question and answer. Like I think it's more like Rick is more of a question than an answer of like how are we supposed to navigate this world? And like you said, he is a tragic character in many ways. And if you're creating a tragic character, you're not saying this is someone who is a model. This is not someone who you should model your life after. And I don't think people are modeling their lives after him, but I do think that they are putting him on a pedestal in a lot of ways, which we have talked about with some of these other characters.
I mean, it could give you an excuse to be more like him. Like the show definitely doesn't. It doesn't always do a very good job of criticizing him for being like a villain, because it makes it highlights his intelligence too much.
It hardly does that. It hardly puts him in his place.
It occasionally does. The 5th season does a few times where it's like, oh, he is kind of just like a sad old drunk idiot. Maybe you shouldn't, use alcohol as a crutch to solve your emotional distress.
Right, but then in the next episode, it's just him like shitting out like something funny, and then they inhabit like his ass, and you're like, oh wow, this is really funny. This is really ridiculous. So there's a lot of meaning that's lost there, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Cool. So Dexter is next on here, a character that I only know about from speaking with other people who have seen Dexter. Unfortunately, I haven't seen it.
Uh, he's he's an interesting character for the parts of the show that remain good. He's definitely an edgelord. Like he is a complete sociopath. Like he doesn't have feelings at all. He like vaguely develops the ability to care for his son very late in the show, but by that point, that's a point in the show I don't really want to talk about. Um, but because he doesn't know how to feel anything and he's incredibly smart, he's often bored because he doesn't understand the normal parts of life that everyone else goes through. This makes him very alienated. And on top of it, uh, he has the drive to kill. He's like the main part of his like backstory is that he watches his own mom die when he's like a really little kid. Um, and it leaves him permanently scarred. And he calls it like his dark passenger, which is just like his will to commit murders. Um, but he's adopted by a cop who teaches him to like live by a code of only killing bad people, which ends up being just him mostly killing serial killers. Um, which is a really good premise for a show. And when they made it works super well, which I would say is up to the fourth season, at which point each season is diminishing returns on the original promise of the premise for the show.
So, are you linking him then to Rick? It sounds like it sounds like there are a couple.
I wouldn't really relate him to Rick at all. You're
well, the intelligence factor and boredom factor.
He doesn't use his intelligence to lord over people, and his intelligence is never really shown to be like a thing you should strive for. Like he only uses his skills to commit murders, which we know are wrong, and he says they're wrong. He just relishes in it and needs to kill in order to feel anything.
So he recognizes that it's wrong?
Yes, he's completely self-aware. The show is in some ways a comedy. But the show like does make it clear that what he's doing is wrong, and he does kill some innocent people along the way. Yeah, it basically when the fourth season ends, like it finishes up his character development as like a tragic arc where like just as he starts to feel something and care for like the family that he's kind of built, it's all taken away from him. And then the show just goes down. Like it's kind of like a shark jumping moment. Like they couldn't top that, and they didn't know what to do with this character, and it all falls apart. But yeah, no, you're meant to empathize with him in a way, but only in the way of like he's taking out the trash. He's kind of like Batman. but that's really it. Like he's just like a extremely evil vigilante who happens to use his skills for justice every so often.
So who is he more similar to then? I guess maybe Alex, just with like more of a moral code that was instilled in him.
Yeah, he's not similar to Alex.
Oh, okay.
Like he's vaguely similar because he is driven by his impulse to kill, but he's such an organized killer that he has no similarity.
Got it.
Like he's driven by his urge to kill, but like he controls it fairly well with these weird things he's taught by his cop dad.
Interesting.
I'm trying to think of which character he's similar to. Like
is it more like a really clinical Joker who targets other Jokers? By clinical, I mean like very organized with his methods. Or maybe even Travis Bickle.
It's hard for me to compare him to any of them because he is just straight up a serial murderer. Like he tortures and kills hundreds of people in the show.
Oh God. Okay. All right.
Yeah. And like most of them most of them are bad people, and one of the show's major flaws is it never really asks you whether or not a lot of these murders are justified, because it kind of just goes like, well, Dexter's evil, but he knows he's evil, so it's okay.
Put your thumb up. Yeah. Yeah.
And then every so often, when it does get more morally gray and he kills someone who isn't evil, they kind of just brush it under the rug, like, it's fine, he's a serial killer, just let him get away with it.
Yeah, it's strange too. This also brings us back to that point, which is what is the responsibility of the people who are telling these stories? Because what it seems like is, it seems okay from, like, it seems like they're justifying what he's doing because he's killing serial killers,
Yes.
which is, as you said, a great premise for a show. But it's also, in my mind, one of those things that's like, okay, should we bomb Hiroshima in order to save people?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it's very much
it's the same logic.
It's very much a Machiavellian ends justify the means type of logic and code of morality. Yeah, I think this is a show that is past the pale in terms of, like, what's the showrunner's responsibility towards not having people empathize with him, because you shouldn't. Like, a lot of the time, I think the show kind of operates like his, what he calls his dark passenger, is similar to just like any mental illness. Like, that's kind of what the stand-in is supposed to be. So in that way, it's like a show for lonely people, and like the weird, it's set in Miami, so it's weird that it's like the sunny beaches of Miami, and there's always like Cuban music playing, and people are drinking and having fun. But under it all is just this guy who can't empathize with anyone, can't deal with anyone, can't feel happiness. So in that sense, it's like a show that's kind of meant for lonely people who don't feel human connection, even in the face of, a bright sunny day and people enjoying themselves.
Yeah, which makes it even that much more terrifying, because it's basically telling them it's okay.
Right.
And that whatever problems that they have, they should figure out kind of how to control them, but then also just act on those urges every now and then, and that they justify those. Mm-hmm. Is what it seems like. I haven't seen it, but that's what it sounds like.
It's a great character in a show that has great moments that gets worse as it goes to the end point where the character and the show are unrecognizable from what they were at the beginning.
Huh.
Like, it is a legendary,
like in a bad way.
Yeah. Like, the decline of the show is at this point very well known.
Gotcha.
Like, the first season is like he is hunting a serial killer who turns out to be his brother, who witnessed the same horrible thing he did, and he kills his brother at the end because he's more evil than him and kills innocent people.
And so does Dexter deserve a movie or a series of movies?
What do you mean?
Like, does it just go on too long that they don't know what to do with him? Because it sounds kind of like that. Like, the story would be better if it were just shorter.
No, they like by the fourth season, he's married. He's married to a woman he's been with since the first season, who has 2 kids of her own.
Oh, God.
And then he has a kid with her.
What?
And then she dies. She gets killed by the serial killer he's following the whole show.
Oh,
and it's his fault, because he's been hunting this guy, and he gets basically too close. The guy figures out who he is, and then while Dexter is like closing in on him, he kills his wife.
Jeez.
And leaves his newborn son in the room with the dead mom, thus creating a new Dexter.
Oh, I was literally just about to ask that, yeah.
Yeah, so that twist is incredible. Like, it's a great ending to the best season of the show, and a really, really compelling season of TV overall. But after that, they don't know where to go, because they've stalled out his character and taken away the one part of him that was creating humanity. So then each season, like, that season kind of just treads water. Like, they find a new serial killer to hunt and whatever, and there's lots of plot contrivances. and it gets sillier. And then after that, each season, just the writing goes down, the quality of the characters around Dexter go down, and the path for him to move forward and like find closure in his own emotional state of being just disappears.
Gotcha.
It gets way crazier. Like the last season is like just, oh god, it's awful. He just like, it turns out all along that like the code that his dad taught him was taught to him by some like psychotherapist lady who knew Dexter all along, and there's all these like plot twists of things that he should have found out like in the first season.
Excuse me?
Reveal them all at once. And then by that point in the show, his sister, like adopted sister, finds out who he is like a few seasons before, and is like just helping him commit crimes at this point. Like, it's completely done a 180 on her character. And,
Nice.
And then it just ends with him like he just routinely defeats the villain of the season, like no problem, and then kills his sister, and then just like rides off into a hurricane.
I was gonna ask, does he ever take out his sister? 'Cause, yeah,
He just kills her at the end for really no reason, just cause.
why did the chimpanzee rip my face off? It seemed really nice. Well, the chimpanzees are chimpanzees. They will do those kinds of things. Why did the shark bite my arm?
Yeah,
we were friends.
I don't think the show went on for too long. I think they ran out of quality source material from the book series it's based on, because the book series goes off the rails, I think, around the same time in a different way.
Didn't you say something with spirits?
Yeah, there's literally the devil's spirit of Moloch or something possesses people, and he literally has to fight a demon. Like, it's a completely different and equally bad.
It sounds interesting, but not in that show.
No, it doesn't. It never would have worked in the show. Thank God they didn't do that. But then the show actually ends with Dexter like beginning a new life in like Maine or Canada as a lumberjack.
Yeah, that sounds kind of like what happens to Walter White in some ways.
Yeah, but then they do there actually is a sequel show.
Yeah, there's a revival of it or something.
Single season revival to try to sate the appetite of really pissed off fans who all universally hated the end of the show.
Oof.
And it's just like a middling season, just like a bad season of Dexter for sure, and like an average season of TV.
Brutal.
Which starts off in a place the show was already ruined and goes nowhere, and then at the end he just dies. Like, his son comes back and just shoots him with a gun. And
as no offense, but let's move on from Dexter. I feel like you could rant. I feel like you could rant about Dexter forever.
No, I've said all that needs to be said. Like, he's a compelling edgelord. I don't know too many people who like the show. I know they're out there, but I think because the show bombed so spectacularly, people don't like quote him the way they probably still quote the Joker.
Right.
But there's definitely some culpability with the people who made that show in terms of like just not asking the question, should we really be getting people to empathize with and maybe think like this guy?
Yeah. So would you want to move into the big one, or do you want to move into Nightcrawler?
We can move into American Psycho, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like this is the moment we've been building up towards after hitting Walter White.
Cool with the anti-Semitic remarks.
Tony Soprano. Is that a quote from it?
That's a quote from Patrick Bateman, yeah. in a long list of endlessly quotable one-liners from him in this movie.
Damn. Yeah, I'm going to need to watch this again, honestly. I think I've only seen it twice. Yeah, twice.
Eggshell White.
I do remember that.
It's just a long conversation about business cards.
No, it's a masterpiece.
He's definitely, of all these characters, the best well-written in terms of describing like a anti-hero edgelord protagonist.
It's interesting because when I first saw American Psycho, I was certainly of the mind that what I was watching and his character was just too ridiculous for me to take seriously, which like clearly like I just didn't get it. Like I didn't grasp how incredible his character was and what they were trying to do with him. Like I was viewing his character as almost like how do I explain this? Almost like Jared Leto. Interestingly, Jared Leto is in it, but Jared Leto's Joker in that is just like all over the place and really ridiculous and just doing weird shit to do weird shit.
Yeah, somehow Jared Leto is the through line here of this whole discussion, since he's in Fight Club and he plays the Joker. And
and is in American Psycho.
Yeah, sorry, didn't mean to derail you there, but
no, it's just I'm just trying to point out the fact that like when you do watch a movie, it's just crazy how that movie, I mean, any great art, it's great art because you can keep revisiting it. And if you didn't get it the first time, maybe go see it again, or maybe go look at it again or listen to it again. It's just, it truly is incredible because it stands up to so much. And when you watch it again, the crazy stuff that he does, it really just pulls the levers at the right time. His responses to things are all like perfectly orchestrated from a narrative standpoint and a character standpoint. And the fact that it's only, what is it, an hour and 20 minutes, an hour and 30 minutes? Maybe it's 2 hours. I don't know. I don't think it's that long of a movie. It's just jam packed with meaning.
Hour and 42 minutes.
All right, there you go. An hour and 42 minutes.
It's not a long movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really excellent book. I haven't read the book, but I imagine adapting this was not easy.
Good God, yeah.
Because it's just a wild take on a character that Christian Bale nails. I don't know if I've seen him do a performance that's as good in terms of getting across like the madness, but also the fun, like the way in which he enjoys going insane.
Yeah, I mean him with the raincoat on, doing the like little dance. Do you like Huey Lewis and the News?
Yeah, like if a Clockwork Orange is a more objective view of evil, like just portraying this man as he is and not necessarily trying to make it fun, even though the character is having fun, I don't think the movie is taking part in the fun, so to speak. This one has fun completely dissecting not only bodies, but dissecting like everything that it is against, because it is anti-materialism, anti-narcissism, anti-greed. I mean, it really hammers this point home the more gruesome the movie gets. But
would you say it's anti-American or it's anti what America creates by saying that America creates psychos?
It's definitely anti-American in terms of what it views American culture as being through the 90s. Like the shift in American culture that happened through the 70s to lead to the inherent materialism of the 80s, which led to sort of the stagnant, bloated feeling that people had in the 90s. Endemic of something like grunge music, which became popular. Like, I think this this movie hates all of that. And so in that way, I would say, yes, it's anti-American, but I mean,
right.
Is it wrong? Like,
no. I'm not saying it's wrong.
Yeah, I think it's a really effective take on the shallow emptiness of the pursuit of money and careerism, especially on like, you know, Wall Street and investing, or just living in a city in general, and being completely obsessed with class and social hierarchies. And then, yeah, mentioning the Huey Huey Lewis and the News.
Did you almost say Huey Lewis and the Lose?
Yes. Yes,
I
I
almost said that as well. It was very close.
Um, yeah, I mean, there's kind of like the movie ends with them like talking about. Obviously, it becomes unclear how many of the crimes he committed are real, which is sorry, I didn't realize that was. It's interesting in and of itself, but then like there's this kind of weird aside where they're talking about like Ronald Reagan. Like they're joking whether or not he's secretly like some kind of genius psychopath, or if he's just like a harmless old idiot. And I think that's a good example of like what the movie is trying to go for.
Oh, interesting. I definitely never caught on to that.
It's just another criticism of like this type of culture or subculture that it views America as turning into.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot from that movie that I don't remember. I certainly will have to see that again. So I guess since we have approached Patrick Bateman, the protagonist then of American Psycho, would you not say that he kind of is just a blend of Tony Soprano and Dexter Morgan? Based on what I know from Dexter.
Not really, because Dexter is all about how like he was born in blood, like he was born to be a killer because of what he experienced, whereas Bateman is just like he learned how to be the way he is to be like a quote unquote killer, um, for like a corporate job. Like he isn't like fighting against this system like the metaphors of the movie
So is
are,
he?
but he's not. Like he's partaking in it.
So
He's
wait, is he
enjoying it as a
then
character.
Alex? Is he just Alex in America?
Yeah, in a way.
Alex?
It's just his crimes aren't socially acceptable.
Neither crime, neither
I guess, yeah,
neither of their crimes
yeah,
are socially
I guess I didn't think
acceptable.
about it that way. Yeah.
I mean, throwing a chainsaw down on someone's head or the grisly murders that he commits are certainly not fine. What's really interesting is how he sort of like continues to up the ante. Obviously, there's some discussion and debate whether or not it's all happening in his head or parts of it are happening in his head. I sort of think that it's clear that there are a number of moments that are happening in his head. But that just
the whole
that
thing is kind of in his head.
but it just reinforces him going insane. Sorry, keep going.
Wasn't like Paul Allen alive at the end, like Jared Leto?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he is. But anyway, what I was gonna say is that I lost my train of thought there. Alex, he's committing these egregious acts, but it's almost like he keeps doing these things so someone can like hold him accountable. Like he's unconsciously doing it because he wants on some level, like, I don't want to say get caught, but maybe like get caught. Like he's acting out so he can end this existence, like end what he's been doing.
Yeah, that's true, because a lot of these characters do live lives without consequences in a weird way.
Yeah, and it just brings up to me the point that we oftentimes do things unconsciously, like we're acting out things that we do unconsciously in order to, I don't want to say get caught, but a lot of our actions are unconscious manifestations of what we want, is how I would say that.
Ah, yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
I thought I just said something that broke your mind or something too ridiculous.
No, I just had to think about it for a second.
Okay, got it. I never thought of him as being like Alex in America, but I certainly think they're very similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Certainly the one who's the most similar to Alex.
Yes, it's the examination of him and the fact that he, ends up being insane that makes it more similar to like Fight Club, but the character itself is definitely more along Alex's lines than like Tyler Durden.
Huh. I think that's one of the reasons why I like A Clockwork Orange so much, is that it never goes into the insane thing. Like, it's almost like the insanity like gives him an out.
It gives a lot of them outs. Like every character has an excuse or an out, whereas like Alex just kind of jokes about why he does it. He's like, "Oh, society's all messed up. Oh, it's all."
Yeah. It's gotten to me, Gulliver.
Yeah, exactly. Right. He's sick to his stomach with how silly society is, but really, it's just he's a bastard.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
no amount of action by the state is going to cure that.
Nope. Yeah. I that's one thing I appreciate about that story so much, is it never gives an out to him. It just fully shows the monster that he is, as opposed to just, oh well, he dealt with some stuff. He's just coping. Which is interesting because, like, obviously, I do think that adds depth to the other character. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm more so saying I just appreciate that at least that story just kind of stuck to its ethic in that way. That builds more, I think, what that story was trying to do, as opposed to adding more backstory to him actually retracts from that message, is what I would say.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like I do think uh, of all of these, Clockwork Orange is probably my favorite.
Really?
Yeah, in terms of its depiction. I mean, just in like my favorite character is probably this Tony Soprano of all these characters, but
That's what I thought you were gonna say.
Clockwork
Yeah.
Orange's like detachment from it, I find to be more interesting.
Detachment from what?
Detachment from the character.
Oh.
Like that's a hallmark of a lot of Kubrick's movies, is the detachment of the objectivity of the camera work and the storytelling from the character.
Right.
Whereas like almost all the rest of these are so subjective to the point where like, Fight Club, Taxi Driver, and American Psycho, it's not even clear what's real or not.
Yes.
And Dexter is like borderline a noir in terms of the voiceover narration. It's dependent upon voiceover narration, but also the fact that we're just always with Dexter. Everything's from his point of view. Like Walter White, most of the stuff we go through with him, we're forced into his emotion. Like there's tons of close-ups of his face. We have to deal with like the way that he bumbles around the world like Mr. Magoo and then messes things up, and then we have to like hit the fallout, emotional fallout for him and the people around him. Like, it's very subjective with him. The Sopranos is different because what we see from every different character is different, but Tony himself doesn't have feelings, so it's weird to watch him experience like pain.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
As for talking about some of the other stuff we have on this list, like Nightcrawler, I view Nightcrawler as being definitely a great movie and an excellent performance of that character by Gyllenhaal, but like it's just a different version of some of these ones we've already talked about, and
Taxi Driver,
I would
for
say
sure.
a worse version. Yeah, kind of like I mean, it's a character who's like he has to be extreme to succeed in his career. So he's kind of like Travis Bickle if Travis Bickle wanted to become Patrick Bateman. Because the whole point is that his character wants to just be like a really good photographer or news person because he just can't get a job. And that's the one he just decides he's good at because he's willing to do anything and be up all hours of the night searching for a story.
Right. It's almost like that's because he never actually kills anyone, does he? He just like
yeah, he definitely forces that one guy to die.
Right. But
or like causes him to get into an accident.
Right, but it's interesting that he is like he kind of like where some of these other characters like get off on killing someone, he kind of gets off on like filming it and like capturing it.
Yeah, he's kind of like us, watching and enjoying the rest of this stuff.
Yes.
And that's what makes the movie itself great, is because it's condemning us, the audience, for enjoying this type of thing, for enjoying anti-heroes and people who will quote unquote do whatever's necessary for the shot or for these other people's
Right. The difference is that we're watching fiction and he's watching reality and capturing it and then making money off of it.
Yeah. As for everyone else on the list that we haven't talked about, it's a pretty short list of other stuff. The rest of these are ones that I think cross the line.
The rest of them are what?
These other four characters cross the line because the show is either too stylized or the character is too cool for there to be any sort of statement outside of audience enjoyment. So that would be Hannibal Lecter from either the movie Silence of the Lambs or the Hannibal Lecter TV show. Thomas Shelby from Peaky Blinders, which I haven't seen all the way through.
Thomas Shelby definitely is that. That's what you just said.
Yeah. Jax Teller from Sons of Anarchy, and then V from V for Vendetta.
The guy with the Guy Fawkes mask.
Right.
I think it's the angle that you're...
character.
The angle you're talking into, it sounds odd.
How about now?
It's like storm drainish. I don't know.
That's because I'm right next to it.
I think it's a wire. If you unplug a wire and plug it in, I think it's possibly that.
How about now?
That's better. Yeah, I would agree with that. That these four are certainly separate. I mean, you could put some of the ones we talked about down there as well, but Hannibal Lecter, you said is too cool, like portrayed as too cool.
Yeah, like he fits into the he's big brained, but it's never shown to be a problem. Like it's just his big brain machinations are the driving force of the entertainment.
Right.
And it turns murder into an art. So the show is like one part, like equal parts, like art house, just doing ridiculous stuff with murder, and then the other part is like police procedural schlock.
It sounds like Dexter Morgan if Dexter was less clinical in the murders and more artsy.
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
Dexter, I would throw in with this group. because
Gotcha.
the show is just worse than everything else we've talked about.
Yeah. I mean, Thomas Shelby certainly is what you talked about. I would liken Thomas Shelby to being like a worse version of Walter White. But also similar to Tony Soprano in that like he's dealing with PTSD. So he like kind of does some things to try and make up for the PTSD, but then in trying to overcome his PTSD, he does things for the family. And then it's like not really for the family, but it's just for himself, like for his ego in a lot of ways. Which is like a pretty decent segue then into Jax Teller as well, in that same vein, similar vein.
Oh yeah, I mean, I like both Thomas Shelby and Jax Teller are just like poor imitations of The Sopranos, but they infuse more action elements and take away some of the more like psychological elements that make The Sopranos good.
Definitely.
Like they still both focus a lot on family drama, but they take away all of the like background stuff that makes Tony who he is and makes the show an examination of evil. Whereas like I mean, I can't speak that much to Peaky Blinders, but it seems like it's mostly just like the way in which he maneuvers to be the emperor of his like crime empire. Jax is the same way. Jax is like living in the shadows of his father. I don't know what Shelby's main push is to do what he does, but
he has more depth than Jax, I would say. The new season has come out of Peaky Blinders, so I haven't seen it. But yeah, I would argue he has a little bit more depth to his character, and definitely not as much as Tony, or even Walter White for that matter. But very similar. And then V for Vendetta, sort of a strange one on this list, but
well, he's just a super edgy character where it's just like, I'm gonna burn down the world because it's unjust and there's corruption and I got screwed over in a evil torture science lab.
Right.
But Christ, he is just so edgy. Like, it's done way better. I don't know if you've read the graphic novel.
I have not.
The graphic novel is better because there's an inherent stylization to Alan Moore's work. But
he's the same one as Watchmen?
Yeah, which also can't recommend Watchmen, the graphic novel, enough in terms of how much better that is than the movie version, which is just dog shit.
Yeah, I mean the movie V for Vendetta, I think is pretty good. I think it's good.
Yeah,
it's not the best movie ever, certainly. Certainly not. But yeah, I definitely would like to read that. I think it's interesting too because I mean just thinking about all of these characters from a story perspective, it's very strange that Tony Soprano has, like you said, that he's your favorite, right? I just think it's interesting that he kind of sticks out to me as one of the most important characters on this list, but he doesn't have as much like written canon on him. Like he is loosely based on someone who actually existed, correct?
Not as much written canon. Tony Soprano?
Yeah.
There's been way more written about him than anyone else on here.
I more so mean before they made it, like as they made it, like he didn't have as much written about him before they made the show. Like they had to just invent this and everything with it.
Maybe. I mean, I think David Chase knew psychologically who he was and where his traumas and issues came from probably after they finished the first season.
Yeah, but he came up with that.
Yes, it's an original work. Like, really, the only thing I think it's based on from reality is just David Chase reading headlines of weird mob stuff happening in New Jersey.
Yeah. Whereas like V for Vendetta obviously has the graphic novel that it's based on. That's more so what I mean.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. The iterations of the Joker are informing the Joker that came. Tyler Durden is based off. Yeah.
I guess Taxi Driver is an original screenplay from Paul Schrader, and
yeah,
I mean, after Clockwork Orange, Taxi Driver is my favorite of these in terms of like quality of content.
Yeah, I love A Clockwork Orange. Maybe that says there's something wrong with me. I just think it's just so steeped in irony that like I haven't even quite figured out all of it yet. I feel like I understand it really well too.
I'm speaking more about the movie than the book, which I've only read once and couldn't give you a detailed beat by beat breakdown of versus the movie.
I mean, A Clockwork Orange was entirely the reason I switched my major to an English teacher, just based on how much I enjoyed not only the narrative of the story, but mostly just the like world immersion based on language. That just like convinced me, because of the way my brain works with words, how much I would enjoy like teaching that and trying to get that across to other people. And taking part in the act of storytelling and understanding a story is just like really, really enjoyable and fun. And that story just does such a good job of immersing you in based on its language. And then there's the movie, which does a similar thing, but with all of its really, really brilliant visuals and its slow, like undulating form and color and
I think
ultra violence.
I think it does it the same way, but through the mode of cinema.
Yeah.
I just like movies more than books. And I like Kubrick more than I like Anthony Burgess in terms of his own use of the form.
Well, I'm an English teacher right now, but I certainly hope to be a filmmaker soon. And I also like movies more than books. Yeah. As far as my favorite on the list, it's definitely A Clockwork Orange as well. I truly had no idea that you would have said that ahead of this episode. I totally thought you would have said American Psycho or Tony Soprano. I know you said Tony Soprano is your favorite character. I don't think Alex is my favorite character, actually. It's tough for me to choose between all of them. Obviously not favorite in that, you know, I want to be this character, but
oh yeah, I want to be Tony Soprano.
Well, you just got to move closer to me then.
And gain like 200 pounds.
200 pounds?
Yeah, since he's taller than me, I'd have to make up with it with pure girth.
I don't think he's taller than you.
Well, he's not anymore because he's dead now, but...
Well, you would also need to become Italian.
I'm talking about James Gandolfini.
I thought he was only like 5'10". Anyway,
I'm gonna look this up now because he's 6'1", so I guess he's just your height.
Yeah, he's just as tall as I am, so I just have to gain a bunch of weight and become Italian.
I guess that just speaks volumes to how well crafted the show is and how dominating a presence he is as an actor. That he feels huge.
Yes.
Or the way, maybe not even that, but the way in which he just makes everyone else feel small.
Yes, definitely.
Also, I didn't even consider this. I guess a lot of the actors in it are Italian Americans, and they're just shorter because he is taller than everyone else. But I guess it's because they're all short dudes and short Italian ladies.
So, I mean, we could take several different approaches at this point. as far as like nature versus nurture goes, looking at um each of these characters and how they either became this way or just are this way, but then also in looking at our world, um are people more morally gray than they used to be, and like is our world more morally gray, or how do you want to tackle that thought?
Which thought?
Are people, like real people, not these people on this list, are people more morally gray right now?
People
Or
in our world.
Like they're not as certain about things as they used to be?
I don't know if I could say that for certain. I think people are pretty set in their ways now as they ever have been.
Okay.
All right, let's take
we'll come back.
Yeah, let's pause right here.
Got it. And we're back. So we left off in talking about whether or not people are more morally gray at this point in time than ever before. You said you didn't think so?
No, I think our content has gotten that way in some aspects. I mean, we're also talking about a very specific type of TV show and movie and protagonist of anti-heroes. As for why it's become more popular, it's probably, I would attribute it less to people being more morally gray and just being more cynical. And maybe those are the same thing, but I guess we're more willing to root for the bad guy, knowing that a lot of these bad guys in some way are fighting against injustice.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think also just because it's implicitly different and explicitly different from what people are used to, or what traditional narratives are, or what traditional protagonists are, I think that draws people into it as well because it is edgy. Just it being different in and of itself, rather than just being the same tropes consistently copied and pasted throughout media, makes it more interesting to, I don't even know if I would say a male audience. Obviously these characters are all male, but yeah, I mean, we haven't even really talked about like toxic masculinity brought on by Edgelord Protagonists.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's a cornerstone of every one of these characters. It almost
yeah,
it should go without saying if you're even slightly familiar with any of them. But yeah, like obviously Alex from Clockwork Orange is a rapist. Like the entire thing is based off of like male hierarchies and his relationship to his comrades. Like he has to be a bigger man than them. Tyler Durden Fight Club is just dudes beating each other up. There's tons of homoerotic elements to the movie and presumably the novel as well. And like this one in particular, you could say is like a rallying cry against or warning of toxic masculinity to come as people find less meaning in life due to the bizarre nature of corporatism. Oddly enough, I think it does that far better than American Psycho does, which doesn't really have a lot to say about toxic masculinity.
Yeah, not really. I mean, it does in some ways where like the enjoyment of sex comes back to looking at himself in the mirror while having sex. Like it's almost like the sex is completely selfish, which I think is toxically masculine.
Yeah.
Like I would totally say that part is, but that's really as far as it goes. Which is not a knock on it. I'd actually think that's a good thing that it doesn't really delve too far.
It has
that.
bigger ideas on the mind.
Yeah.
Travis Bickle is an incel, which is inherently comments on toxic masculinity well before that was ever even a term.
Yep.
So some of these are less about that characters being toxically masculine and more about the fans who personify them and use them as justification, where the only injustice in their life is their inability to sleep with a woman.
Yeah. Or inability to love themselves.
Yes.
Inability to love themselves, which then is a symptom of that is that they can't sleep with a woman.
Yeah, they develop too many insecurities which get in their way from ever being, not an edgelord, from ever being really intimate because they just think they're better.
Mm-hmm.
Like these people would definitely be the Rick Sanchez fans and the Joker fans more than anything else.
Yeah, and I mean, I laugh, but it is honestly extremely sad. Like there's no other way objectively of thinking about it. It is objectively sad that there are so many people who are you all right?
Yeah,
your eyes look like they're gonna fall out of your head.
Just rubbing my eyes.
Yeah, it is just really sad that many people are feeling that way, and they do identify with these characters because of that sadness, but it's almost like they can't experience the sadness. They don't experience the sadness. They are like several layers away from that sadness.
Well, they're transferring their sadness into anger. That's
what I mean.
They're allowing what should be sadness to become anger, and then they just point the anger at the easiest form, which is the women who reject them.
Yes, and I think anger and sadness are they're not two sides of the same coin. There's a better metaphor for it, but they certainly are cousins of one another.
Yeah, they're related. I mean, they're definitely the two emotions that sadness is definitely the one emotion men are not supposed to feel the most.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
You're supposed to swallow it or suck it up or whatever, and not explore that part of your personality or even think about it, really.
Yeah, which
is a big part of who Tony Soprano is.
I was literally just going to say
having to uphold these masculine values. The show never points it out. It never goes, oh, look at this, look at that, which is something like Rick and Morty fails at all the time because it's just not a show that goes for subtlety. But like that's a huge part of who Tony is. Like he always has to be the biggest man among his friends and mobster cohorts. He has to be the big man of the house and home. And this leads to him doing all kinds of destructive, self-destructive things.
Yeah, it would be very interesting to see how much time passes before a scene where he is crying and then a form of his violence, because it's got to be in super close proximity.
A scene of him, yeah, most of the times where we see him cry, it's these really weird, he'll be like watching a movie, and the movie, like the moment in the movie between two characters will represent like his relationship with his own father or something. Yeah. And it requires you to both remember what's going through his mind at that time and how he's watching a movie to try to escape from the stress in his life, which is actually being caused by some issue he has psychologically from the past. And it manifests in him crying at these things in the movie, but he's never crying over like, shooting his like shooting pussy, for example.
Right.
He doesn't cry over that.
The character pussy.
Would. Yeah. Yes, there's a big pussy is the character's name.
Can't make it up. Can't make this stuff up.
Pussy Bompin' Sarah.
Yeah. Truly a tragedy in and of himself.
Shouldn't have ratted.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that the toxic masculinity is, we kind of have coupled together or intertwined with the cool factor as well, as far as trying to identify the author / director's responsibility in creating this character. In that they're showing how toxic these characters are or dangerous these characters are, but then also they couple their toxicity with this cool factor, right? Almost enticing you to not only just identify, but then also make it okay to like do some of the things that these characters are doing. Not to the point that you are raping someone, not to the point where you're putting an axe in someone's head. Because I think some of those you could interpret as metaphors. But like what accountability do these authors, or should they hold, I guess is kind of what we were wondering.
With how their work influences people?
Yeah.
All of it. I guess all of it is too broad a term, because you can't, like, I don't think it's Todd Phillips' fault that somebody watched Joker and then went out and shot someone else. But on the same end, like, you can't make a movie like The Wolf of Wall Street and not in the back of your mind go like, yeah, this will probably inspire someone to be an investment banker, knowing that it's a tragedy.
Yeah, is it not? Like, we talked about that before, but like, it certainly is inspiring many people to go into business because they're like, oh yeah, I could just be Jordan.
Yeah, so that's the subtlety of it, is like, I don't think somebody like Kubrick ever had that question in his brain. What impact will this have on the audience in terms of my culpability with how this might inspire violence?
Right. He was just, how do I get the story and the character? How do I just make the best movie I can?
Not only that, I think, is part of it. Another part of it is that the movie for him is a reaction to a world he sees as violent. Like, keep in mind that the movie he made before this one was Dr. Strangelove.
Right.
He made that, or no, that's not true. He made 2001 Space Odyssey, but before that he made Dr. Strangelove.
Gotcha.
And yeah, even though 2001 might kind of undercut the point I'm making about how he was a man who saw a world filled with violence, like, he moved to the UK to leave America because he found that LA was becoming unsafe, and he thought New York was like, he just thought America was a place full of violent hooligans. So he moved to England and then set the same ideas in the English countryside, you know, of his own fears of being ripped from his home and watching his wife get murdered. And
yeah.
But I'm sure he would vehemently deny that it had that level of impact. Like, this is the same type of conversation that gets had with like violence in content and how much responsibility or culpability there is with the creators of like Grand Theft Auto or Quentin Tarantino, and being asked like, don't you think there's a danger to having too much of this violence? Like, because Tarantino's movies are unabashedly fun and portray violence as fun, and he's right, those movies are a ton of fun.
Yeah.
But are these reporters also not kind of justified in being like, well, aren't we desensitizing ourselves to this violence? Like, does Inglourious Bastards lack of comment on the Holocaust not present a problem?
I see. Right.
And then it's like, can we even have, like, is this just a topic we can't talk about in a fun way?
Right.
Like, is A Life is Beautiful and Jojo Rabbit just problematic movies because they're going too far and taking a subject that should be wholly serious and making it into something fun? Like,
right.
Basically, the underlying question we're asking is it appropriate to make villains characters that you root for or empathize with, and how much fun can we have with their violence or their misdeeds?
Yeah. I mean, imagine making a movie like any of the ones on this list, but it's just Stalin. And you make it fun.
They did. It's called The Death of Stalin.
Yeah, you've been telling me to watch that. Is that actually basically what it is?
Well, it's he dies at the beginning of the movie,
right?
But then the rest of it is just like a somewhat quirky romp through the transition of power.
Jeez.
I say somewhat because there are like 2 moments where it's like, oh right, this was a real thing that happened and it got real brutal real quick.
Good God. Yeah. I certainly don't have an answer for it because obviously someone going out and shooting someone, they did that. They had to go do it, right? But as far as like the idea of it, right, it could have originated or maybe did originate from like a movie or a show that they saw.
I think there's a clear line, and I think the line that we drew is where it's appropriate and where it isn't, in terms of like these show, like those characters that we didn't really talk about because they're over the line, where they're too stylized and like too cool in a way.
Such as the last 4, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Hannibal Lecter, Tom Shelby,
Teller, yeah.
Guy Fawkes. Okay. Or V.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Dexter, you said, right? Because
yeah,
I would put Dexter on that.
Yes. Yeah. Dexter in there as well. I just don't think that the people who made any of these pieces of art.
I thought you were going to say trash.
I don't. No. I was going to say content, and then that gets into a rabbit hole about the difference between calling something art versus content. But yeah, I think these characters, or the content, the shows and movies that these 5 characters are from, pale because they're less subtle, because they go for something that is more stylized. They go for something that is cooler. I don't think that they had even a remote question of what this might do to an audience, other than like, let's just make this as cool and relatable as possible.
Okay. Well then,
I don't think they bear any responsibility for the actions of people watching it in doing anything, though.
I don't either.
I just think they should have kept it in mind if they wanted to make something as enduring as The Sopranos, basically.
Yes.
Like,
you mean by vilifying?
By understanding. Like, The Sopranos, if nothing else, makes you fully understand Tony Soprano. Yes. You understand his fears, his hopes, his loves, his hates, everything. We don't really get that for some of these other characters, even though they try to get us there. Like, there's just too much glitz and glam in the way. Or other problems, like just poor writing at some point.
I was going to say a lot of just other stuff gets in the way of going down further rabbit holes that retract from either character or story or both.
Like, basically, I think it's something that you should keep in mind.
Yes.
But,
yes. Because that will help you have a better product at the end.
Because you shouldn't just be ignoring your audience. You should be thinking about how what you're showing them might impact them.
Got it.
I just would never go so far as to say that someone who recreates one of the really elaborate murder scenes from the Hannibal show would have anything to do with the creators of that show going to jail.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, because then that's obviously a huge slippery slope.
Like, the only actual line in reality that you might take in terms of like, oh, that was their fault, is if you made a movie that was just entirely about like how Nancy Pelosi's husband is a devil worshipping baby eater and needs to be killed immediately. Right. And then, like, you know, then if somebody goes out and like attacks him,
just yeah,
maybe that's saying fire in a theater. Like, sometimes it's saying fire in a theater, but rarely.
Right.
Like,
instead of historical fiction, it's just realistic historical fiction.
Yeah. Like, maybe the line is just that you need to show the fallout from the characters' decisions and actions.
That's what I was getting at is I think,
because we do.
I think showing that is extremely important in the audience understanding, despite, you know, many audience members not understanding that. But
because we see that in everything. To return to Clockwork Orange, like the only time we really get to see it is when he returns to that house of the people he attacked.
definitely.
And then when the guy figures out that it's the guy who attacked him and left him wheelchair bound, instead of just like killing him, he uses him for his own political gain, because the movie is so cynical that it's like, no, not even this guy that you think is innocent is good. He's just a shithead like everyone else.
Yes. He seizes it as an opportunity. Certainly.
Whereas, the rest of these, there is consequences. Like the consequence of Fight Club, where you don't really see it as much, is the implication that, like, if Tyler Durden is to go unchecked, he'll just literally blow up New York City from the ground up.
Yeah.
And that's, in terms of inspiring terrorism, if they had ended that movie differently, we could have had a much different conversation about what caused 9/11.
Oops. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, that story in particular does say a lot about toxic masculinity as well. I think more than any of the other ones, given like the end result.
Yes.
Too. As you already have said, I don't want to retread that ground.
Yeah, I mean, he fights with himself over it. It's an issue in that he internalizes and then has to cope with, and in coping with it, he has to root out that part of himself in order to get healthy, which is kind of why it's like a really good case against inceldom.
It's a good case against inceldom, but then also if you miss that point, then you just go all in on toxic masculinity. But at the same time, if you miss the point on any of these, then you just go all in on whatever.
Yeah, somewhat. But I think that's a good point. Like we briefly talked about Jordan Peterson at one point.
Yep, to intro the episode.
Yeah, and that I think is I think it's a good place to maybe go towards a conclusion, because he is a guy who's at this point career is defined by sort of speaking directly to incels. Like the target, his target demographic would be similar to a target demographic if you took all of these movies and TV shows, splattered them together and said, who's going to watch all of these? It's probably vaguely going to be someone who either embodies a lot of very strong masculine traits and watches these and goes, these are my heroes, or very weak men who wish they were stronger and view them the same way.
And then there's you and I. We're clearly one of those. We have to choose.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm a big strong man.
I'm a small weak man. Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. Especially given that Jordan Peterson, for all of his faults, I do think does recognize the fact that we do have this huge problem, and it's a growing problem as well for various reasons, in that more and more incels are made every single year. For various reasons. Maybe they aren't made every year. Maybe it's just that there are more people, so there are going to be more because there is a higher population of people. That I don't know. But I think he is correct in identifying that that's a problem, and he seems to be trying to do something about it, trying to speak directly to them, like you said.
Yeah, I think he earnestly wants to help people, but his solution is toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
Like it is a solution to get people who can't even go to work on time every day or get up out of bed every day. It is a solution for them.
Right.
It's just an old conservative traditional solution, which we already know causes more problems in the long run. But in terms of like a process for individuation, like all of the ideas he puts together and then repackages to sell to the masses, like basically just is toxic masculinity. Like,
Yeah.
his arguments a lot of the times are just about becoming an alpha male and trying to outpace others by dehumanizing them, and especially talking about women in like inferior roles.
Use your big brain to outbrain others,
which you barely need to do if you're trying to, progress past women, because women are inherently tricksters and also dumb and also will have children. So you'll beat them. Don't worry about it.
Yep. That is pretty true. True to what Jordan Peterson is saying.
Yeah.
Not true in the real world.
We can have a longer conversation about him at some point and like debunking what he says that's wrong and then highlighting maybe how he's misunderstood in other ways. Because the general take on him is he's a dangerous alt-right lunatic who drives people towards fascism, and he hates trans people a lot, and he hates women a bit, but a little less than he hates trans people. And I think that's an unfair characterization of him. Just completely. Some of those things are true. He definitely has some issues with women.
Right.
The trans stuff is another. I don't want to get into that, but by and large, I think his popularity in large part shows the need for this type of content to be cool, to be easily digestible, to be beloved by people, and not for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And that's probably like my answer to your just question at all of like, what's their responsibility? Their responsibility is to not take a Jordan Peterson view, or to like have that be harder to explain or prove through the text to an audience.
Yeah, it's interesting you're saying that his answer to inceldom is just toxic masculinity. Do you think that people become toxically masculine because they don't want to be incels? Like, do you think that it's in response to that? Like, they already have figured that out in some way?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying in a healthy way, but I'm saying that like they see that as the answer to the potential future problem of becoming an incel.
Yes, I think plenty of people who don't go down that path in the first place have already made a conscious choice.
Damn. Yeah. Makes sense.
Like if maybe not even a conscious choice, but they've made a choice somewhere along the way. Like if you're a 13 or 14-year-old kid and you realize that in order to make friends and get girls, you need to be on a football team, then you just join the football team and then you roll that into your personality. And that's an area where, this type of toxic masculinity is rewarded rather than punished.
Anthony Jr.
Exactly. I mean, Anthony Jr. is just like a poor man's Tony Soprano, the same way that Tony is just like a more flawed version of his father.
Yep.
Or more flawed in terms of like, he goes and sees a therapist because he's crazy and fainting, whereas his dad is just like a ruthless maniac.
Yeah, it is.
Who doesn't even question himself. And you see how that plays out over time. The echoes is just that Junior,
the echoes of trauma.
The generational trauma, ends up with Junior just being like an idiot.
Yeah.
Just hopeless, like screwed completely by his parents, primarily his dad.
Yeah, which I hate to laugh at because it is really sad.
I find it funny because of all the overly ridiculous shit that they make him do through the series. Like just the subplots with him are like,
oh yeah,
some of the worst parts of the show.
Anthony Jr. subplots.
Anthony Jr. and Meadow. Those two have some of the most poorly written subplots.
They definitely didn't know what to do with the kids. That's for sure.
Not the whole time.
Yeah, I think this is a good point to wrap this up. In a lot of ways. Oh man. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. I literally just taught this 2 days ago, this poem.
Yeah, that was kind of where I wanted to end, was with that, because it's just a really great, not only like a meditation on the irrelevance of power and wanting to be a ruler, but just in general a takedown of like what the end point is for all of these characters who desire nothing else but their own success, their own ego being fed, accumulation of wealth. Because it just, you know, in the end, no matter what you build, it will erode. And you'll become just a pair of legs.
Yeah,
lost to time.
Or just one leg. I don't know if you know much about this poem, Ozymandias.
I've read it. Yeah.
By Percy Bysshe Shelley. But do you know why it was written?
Oh, no.
So why
was it written?
It was written for a contest. So I teach this poem in accordance with another poem that is also called Ozymandias, which is by Horace Smith, who I know absolutely nothing about, which I would argue is a slightly worse poem because it doesn't have as many layers to it as Ozymandias.
And I'm sure no banger of a line like this one.
There is a line that is actually very similar, but it is not as good.
Look on my works, ye mighty, in despair.
It literally does say, my name is Ozymandias, but it doesn't say the King of Kings part.
Gotcha.
But anyway, it's the idea behind Ozymandias is certainly extremely relevant here also because it does call into question how you are as a person as well, in that it's saying like if you are, you know, a toxically masculine person, then you are going to eventually turn to dust, right? And what effect did you have on the world? What effect did you have on the people that you were surrounded by? The exact line is from that poem is, I am great Ozymandias, saith the stone, the King of Kings. This mighty city shows the wonders of my hand, which is just not even remotely close to it. That's just an aside, but yeah, I mean, it just shows that if you do become a toxically masculine person, you will also still be forgotten. But before you become forgotten, you will have affected many people's lives in much the same way that these characters on this list have as well.
A total destruction, total annihilation.
Did you purposefully mean to say total annihilation?
Yeah.
Because of the poem?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. Yeah, annihilated, just like the city, just like the civilization. I mean, Walter White I can't help but have him come to mind with Ozymandias, right? The literal name of an episode.
With meant to be the episode of the downfall of him and his empire. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, that should wrap it up. I think that's a
good place to, yeah.
Great job, everyone. Everyone on the list. Alex, Tyler, Travis, Joker, Tony Montana, Walter White, Henry Hill, Nightcrawler, Jordan Belfort, Tony, Patrick Bateman, Hannibal.
Yeah, we didn't talk too much about Jordan Belfort, but
that's okay.
You know, greed is good and all.
Greed is good in all things except sand.
I hate sand.
Well, That should do her. Till next
Yeah.
time.
Until next time.
Adios.